Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 25th of September, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So I'm back. I'm back after a few days actually, and there's a lot to get through as you can see from my tabs here. I hope you guys didn't miss me too much. There was a bunch of things that happened, I guess, over the last few days that I would consider to be like major announcements. Maybe there's definitely one big one, which was the Eclipse team coming out and saying they're building a layer 2 on Ethereum based on Solana's virtual machine or Solana's technology, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the episode. And there were a few other things as well around that. But definitely going to be a layer 2 heavy episode today. I can see all the tabs that I've got here. There's a bunch of layer 2 updates. But to start us off today, we're going to go over some Ethereum core updates. So we've got a blog here. A blog post here from Christine Kim summarizing the latest Ethereum all core developers consensus call. Now, I've got some bittersweet news here, unfortunately. I mean, I don't think it's actually sweet. I think it's probably just mostly bitter news, unfortunately. But this is around timing of the Denkun update. Now, the core part of, I guess, this post, Christine kind of summarizing a Twitter thread here, is that she says, it is still up in the air what the timeline for Denkun testing will look like after DevNet 9 is stabilized. But one thing developers agreed to on the call is launching Denkun on a public testnet, likely early to mid-November before the start of DevConnect. Now, this kind of confused me a little bit because I kind of felt like we were closer to testnets than mid to late November. I know that we're almost in October, but I kind of felt like the first testnet would have been forked in sometime in October. I feel like early to mid-November is quite late. And I think with the testnets, it doesn't necessarily matter if all the clients aren't ready for the first testnet in my mind. They can join later. So I don't necessarily think that early to mid-November is something that, how do I put this? I think it's like a conservative kind of thing. I feel like it could be done sooner, but obviously I'm not a client developer, so I'm kind of just opining on this as like a backseat driver here. But given that that was said on the call, and if the first public testnet to fork is Girly in early to mid-November, that would mean that it seems unlikely that Denkun would launch this year. It seems more likely that it would be either in sometime in Jan, maybe late Jan or Feb, because as I said before, there's no way it's going to launch in mid to late December because that's the holiday period. So if we do an early to mid-November fork on Girly and then we fork Holseky or Sepolia after that, and then we announce a mainnet date, we're already pretty much like into late December by that point in terms of announcing the mainnet date and giving the network 4 weeks to upgrade. It's not going to work. So maybe we get a date in like December where they basically say, here's the date. It'll be in January, or maybe it'll be in February or something like that. And that's when we'll know what the timing is. But yeah, given that the core devs don't expect the first public testnet to fork to Denkun until early to mid-November, it's definitely very unlikely that we're going to get a mainnet launch of Denkun this year. So unfortunately, that's the way it is. I was wrong on my prediction that we'd get it in November here, but yeah, this kind of surprised me. I think there may have been some issues with some clients getting onto DevNet 9, some bugs that need to be ironed out. And I remember I warned about this, saying that if there were bugs that needed to be ironed out, and depending on the clients and stuff like that, it would push things out. But yeah, we'll have to kind of see how that evolves there. It could, in saying that, it could still theoretically happen this year, but it would require the first testnet to fork like mid to late October probably, and then the next one to fork in like early November. And then, I know there's going to be 3 testnets running until Girly shuts down at the end of the year because Holseky will launch, which I'll talk about in a sec. But essentially, it would mean a very tight release schedule, and it would probably mean like a mid-December release for Denkun, which I don't think the core devs want to do. It'd be better for them to leave breathing room until January because obviously people take holidays and over the holiday period, things like that. And it's better for them just to leave it for January. And I would also agree with that. I wouldn't want them to launch it like mid-December. I don't feel like that's a good time to launch a major network upgrade. So I'd be fine with it happening in January, even February. As I said, it's like 2 to 3 months difference. It really does not make a difference, honestly. I don't think anyone's kind of like clamoring for 48.44 right now, especially because gas prices are relatively cheap on the L1, and I don't think 2 to 3 months is going to make much of a difference there. I mean, given maybe the network heats up again and maybe things start going crazy, but I don't know. I doubt it. As I said before, I feel like crypto prices are dead for the rest of the year. Early next year, we should start seeing some life come back into it. That's just a prediction of mine. It's not a certainty, but by that point, we're going to have Denkun anyway, so I think that's fine there. But I'll keep you guys updated on how these things evolve. Maybe they will fork a testnet sooner than early to mid-November. Obviously, the core devs want to get this out quickly as well, but there's a kind of balance between getting it out quickly and also safety, and they're always going to err on the side of the safety kind of thing here, which I agree with definitely, because at the end of the day, we have to maintain Ethereum's kind of uptime, resilience, reliability. We can't kind of put a fork on mainnet when it's not ready, just to save some time here and there, especially if it's only going to save like a month or two. Definitely not worth rushing it in there. But speaking of testnets, we got a new launch time for the Holseky testnet. So you remember that the Holseky testnet was meant to launch on September 15th, but it failed to launch due to a silly configuration error, which honestly, it was so silly when I saw it that I was like, come on, like this shouldn't have happened. And obviously mistakes are made here and there, but I just felt it was so silly at the time. But anyway, the new date is September 28th at 2 p.m. Prague time. There will be, I believe, a kind of like live stream for this. It's at the Bordel room that was kind of made famous around the merge. So yeah, I don't know what 2 p.m. Prague time is for me, to be honest. I think that it's like 8 hours behind me or something like that. So it would be like 10 p.m. my time, maybe, just before I record the refuel. So, and what is September 28th? Is it a weekend? No, it's Thursday. So it's this Thursday. Holseky will hopefully launch. Don't know when it's going to be forked to Denkun. As I was saying before about the testnets, they kind of mentioned Gurley first as the first testnet to fork, but in saying that, I feel like if Holseky is ready for it, then they could maybe do like a dual kind of fork where they do it like within a week of each other, where Gurley goes first and then Holseky and then Sepolia as like the final fork to Denkun, and then mainnet obviously, but we'll have to see how that shakes out there. But I'll keep you guys updated on Holseky. Hopefully it does launch this week, and we're all ready to go on September 28th there. All right, so speaking of Ethereum upgrades, Terrence from Prior Labs here put together a really great blog post that I highly recommend reading called Navigating Ethereum's 2024 Consensus Landscape. So these are all the major upgrades being worked on, or at least a lot of the major upgrades, not all of them, but a lot of the major upgrades being worked on for Ethereum over the next, I guess you could say 12 to 24 months, and especially in 2024. Now, these upgrades include things like increasing the max effective balance for validators, secret single leader election, or SSLE, that I've talked about before, ePBS, as we're all very familiar with right now, EIP 4844 plus, dank sharding, and so much more. But as I said, I highly recommend giving this post a read. It's not very long, but it gives you a great overview of what to look forward to after Denkun, because as I've said before, Denkun is just one upgrade and a long list of upgrades coming to the network. And I would actually say that 4844 is obviously the most exciting thing coming in Denkun, but there are many other exciting upgrades coming over the next couple of years for Ethereum that aren't necessarily user-facing. So for example, max effective balance increase, that's user-facing if you are a solo staker, or a node operator like through Rocket Pool or something like that, because then you could obviously manage your validators yourself and increase your max effective balance per validator. This obviously impacts solo validators the most, or solo stakers the most, but it's not like an end user thing where the end users of the chain are going to feel that. It's not for them. Same with inclusion lists, which is censorship resistant stuff. Secret single leader election, definitely nothing to do with end users. Fork choice improvements, same thing. ePBS, right? All of this stuff, except maybe 4844 plus and dank sharding, have nothing to do with the end user. But they are very important for the network in order to basically increase its resiliency, its security, its censorship resistant properties, its decentralization, so that can kind of run downstream to users. But in terms of like directly user facing, no, none of these things are, except kind of dank sharding and 4844. But again, you could argue that 4844 and dank sharding aren't actually directly user facing, because they exist to scale layer 2s, which are the user facing places. So users will feel the lower fees because of these upgrades, obviously, but these upgrades are not directly user facing because it's being done for layer 2s. And and things like the new blob transaction type, and also dank sharding, like full dank sharding, are being done for layer 2s rather than users. But still, as I said, critically important to be across all these upgrades and improvements to the protocol if you're interested in that sort of stuff. So I'll link this blog post in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, another blog post for you to check out comes from Mike Nutter here, and he kind of shared this on Twitter saying, the discussion around Enshrined Proposer-Builder Separation, or EPBS, continues to evolve. I wrote a short doc presenting my view of the space, and others may differ, of course. The open questions presented in section 3 of the crux of the discourse. So I recommend giving this post a read if you're interested in anything got to do with PBS or Proposer-Builder Separation, EPBS, all that good stuff there. But essentially, this is what it's like when you do research on things. You essentially go through many iterations of research, and you eventually come to a point where you have like a list of questions, like here, like these open questions that you answer one by one when designing a spec for something to be built around, in this instance, EPBS, which can be implemented by clients and then eventually be hard forked into the network as part of an Ethereum network upgrade. That's kind of like the mini life cycle of what these things, well, I guess like a mini overview of the life cycle of what these things go through. And yeah, PBS as a whole has gone through many different research and design iterations over the years. There are constantly debates and discussions about the best way to do it, how to basically do it in a way that increases Ethereum's decentralization, censorship resistance, and security without compromising on other kind of, I guess, like aspects of the core protocol. And that's always a hard thing to do because it's really just a trade-off space, right? Where every solution has trade-offs and you just have to choose the trade-offs that you're comfortable making in order for that solution to go live on the network. And we've seen this play out with basically everything. And that's why it takes so long for these upgrades to come to mainnet. By the time EPBS hits mainnet, maybe it's not till 2025. And by the time that happens, it would have been what? 3 years, 4 years since we started kind of talking about this and researching this, because if it happens in 2025, we had MEV Boost start getting researched, I believe in 2021 was with Flashbots, and even before then when, what was his name? I'm forgetting his name right now, but he wrote a research paper alongside some other authors called Flashboys 2.0, and that kind of got this discussion started in a big way. But there are obviously parts of this discussion that got started even earlier, but if you want to talk about the core of it, if it goes live in 2025 EPBS, it would cover at least 3 to 4 years worth of discussions and proposals and research and all that entails before it actually got live on mainnet. So it's a huge undertaking, but a lot of people are working on it right now, and a lot of people are involved in getting this to the point where a spec can actually be made, and then eventually clients can implement it, and it can be put into the network. So I'll link this in the YouTube description as well for you to check out. All right, so I just wanted to give this tweet from Avado a quick shout out here. So they tweeted, "This is all you need to become a solo staker and keep Ethereum decentralized. Liquid staking is possible too with Rocket Pool and Stater Labs here." So, I mean, I've talked about this before. You really don't need a powerful machine to stake on Ethereum, whether that's as a solo staker or running a Rocket Pool mini pool, for example, or staking with Stater, or any really kind of staking provider that allows you to stake, or allows you to become a node operator, I should say, because it's very lightweight to run a validator, to run an Ethereum full node. Of course, on the flip side of things, the hardware may be lightweight, but the capital requirement isn't right now, especially for a solo staker. Obviously, you have that 32 ETH capital requirement. And then for Rocket Pool, it's lower. It's like 8 ETH plus 10% worth of RPL as collateral, which is, I think, a thing of fierce debate within the Rocket Pool and wider Ethereum community around that, but that's getting lowered over time as well, and I think Stater has an even lower threshold here, and other solutions coming online will also have a lower threshold, but it's still going to be like a few ETH or something like that, which, the ETH price right now is 1,600 or something like that. And then we obviously expect the ETH price to continue growing over time. So you're always chasing that in terms of dollar terms. But in terms of hardware requirements, it is very low still, which is great, because it would be crappy if it was like both a huge capital requirement and also a huge hardware requirement. It wouldn't really make sense for it to be like that, because then you essentially get, I guess, like what a lot of these layer 1 chains are, where they basically just run by beefy kind of like data centers, or beefy hardware in data centers and stuff like that. So and that's especially true for things like full nodes, not just validators, which obviously isn't the ideal outcome here. So yeah, you can go check out this tweet from Avado. We'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so some, I guess, like Sad news for developers out there who have used the Truffle Suite. So Truffle Suite has been around for a very long time. It's a set of developer tools that has been around, I don't know, since probably 2015 or 2016, lived under the Consensus umbrella for quite a while now. But yeah, they're sunsetting their product. So you can see here, the Truffle Suite will be sunsetting over the next 90 days. Unfortunately, I think because it just hasn't been, it just kind of like has reached the end of its life cycle and has basically been replaced by other tools and frameworks out there, such as Hardhat and a bunch of other developers tools. The names are eluding me right now. I think that there's Hardhat. There is what other ones are there? There's Hardhat, and then there's Foundry. I think out of the Paradigm have built Foundry, and a few others out there. But essentially, yeah, I think Truffle's been sunset because there are already a lot of great developer tools that have kind of been birthed over the years that essentially maybe make Truffle kind of obsolete at this point. But yeah, still a very sad day for developers that have used Truffle for a very long time. I know a lot of Ethereum developers got their start using Truffle, but as I said, there are better and more maintained solutions available today that you can use. But you can check out the blog post that Truffle put out for a full description of what's happening here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so ETHGlobal New York have announced their finalists. So there are 13 finalists here across a broad spectrum of different kind of categories of applications here. So you've got like NFT stuff, zero knowledge stuff, of course. You've got a bunch of other things here that I haven't gotten a chance to check out yet because I haven't had time because I have obviously been away the last few days. But you can go check this out. I'll link the tweet thread in the YouTube description below for you to do so. But as I always say with these ETHGlobal finalists, these are where the most bleeding edge or cutting edge kind of products get developed. And even if these things don't ever kind of become real products and real sustainable products and they don't get funding or anything like that to build it out, to become user-facing, a lot of the ideas that get birthed out of these hackathons get taken on by other projects out there because they're ideas that maybe haven't been explored before, they're things that maybe haven't been implemented before, that people want to test and people want to kind of, I guess, like experiment with at scale. And that's exactly why I love following along with these things, because that's essentially what the most valuable things are that come out of these hackathons. So yeah, as I said, we'll link this tweet thread in the YouTube description below for you to go check out. All right, so I mentioned earlier in the episode this announcement out of the Eclipse team here that they're building what they're calling Ethereum's fastest layer 2 powered by the Solana virtual machine, or the SVM here. Now, this is an interesting announcement for a few different reasons. I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about this and giving my take on this. Now, exactly what are they building here? Well, you can see here that they've tweeted out saying, Eclipse mainnet leverages the best pieces of the modular stack. Ethereum will be for settlements, Solana VM or the SVM will be for execution, and Celestia will be used for data availability and data availability sampling here. Now, of course, because Eclipse SVM is going to be storing data off-chain, it does not make the Eclipse L2 a rollup outright. It makes it a Validium construction where data is not posted to Ethereum L1, it is posted off-chain, in this instance to Celestia. So because of this kind of like modularization here and different technologies being used, the question arose on Twitter, and I followed along with these discussions on Twitter, but I didn't give my opinion on there because I wanted to save it for the refuel. But the discussion arose like, who benefits most from this, right? Is it the Solana ecosystem? Is it the Celestia ecosystem? Is it the Ethereum ecosystem? Who actually benefits the most here? And I think this conversation is multifaceted because there are good arguments on all sides of this spectrum. And I want to start with maybe the spectrum of data availability. I've said for a long time that I think data availability is commoditized. It is not something that is going to accrue a lot of value because you're going to have data availability with Celestia. You have, not Polygon Avail, but you have Avail, which spun out of Polygon. You have EigenDA. You obviously have Ethereum data availability as well, which is going to get better and better with 4844 and improvements there, and obviously danksharding as a whole. So is there really much value in that? And I don't think there is. I don't think that there's much value in data availability. I feel like it's going to be commoditized very quickly. And it pretty much has already been commoditized, I think, because there's other data availability layers out there like off-chain DA that is made up of like a small kind of council of I guess like groups that secure the data. So when you look at it like that, I don't necessarily think Celestia or any data availability layer benefits too much from this. And by benefit, I mean more of like a value accrual thing. In terms of ecosystem benefits, in terms of I guess like getting usage of Celestia and getting people aware of it and acting as like a marketing tool, sure, it does. But in terms of value accrual and especially long-term sustainable value accrual, I don't really see it. All right, so that's the data availability side. What about the execution side? Well, of course, the Eclipse SVM is using the SVM, right? Solana's virtual machine. It's using the technology that was originally developed for the Solana Layer 1 ecosystem. Okay, so does Solana benefit from this? Does the Sol token accrue value because of this? Again, I don't necessarily think so, because I've talked about this before, about how there's been a lot of, I guess, like forks of the EVM, right? And not layer 2 forks. I'm talking about layer 1 forks like Binance Smart Chain and Tron and Phantom and a bunch of these, and like Avalanche C Chain, and a bunch of these EVM chains. They argue, it's very hard to argue that they drove value to ETH, right? Because a lot of these things have their own token, right? So Avalanche has its own token, Phantom has its own token, Tron and Binance Smart Chain have their own tokens, where the value accrued. Because when Binance Smart Chain launched, what token pumped? It was BNB, right? It wasn't ETH. I mean, ETH was already pumping because it was a bull market, but there was a very clear kind of, I guess, delineation there made by the market. And it also plays out in Tron, because TRX has actually accrued quite a bit of value based on its usage. If you actually do a cost analysis or analysis of like fee revenue versus the value of a token on Tron, it's pretty much one of the only tokens that actually maps pretty cleanly to the fee generation it has on its network. It doesn't really have a monetary premium or a store of value premium. So you'd be hard pressed to argue that these forks of the EVM actually drove value to ETH as an asset. Did it drive value to the Ethereum virtual machine ecosystem, to the Ethereum ecosystem, because more people got exposed to the EVM, they learned Solidity, they learned how to program in the EVM, and then that is basically ported over to layer 2. Yes, I would say it definitely did, right? It definitely did benefit the Ethereum developer community. It definitely did benefit the EVM ecosystem. I just don't necessarily think the value flowed to ETH because of that. It definitely leaked out to these other tokens out there. So bringing it back to the SVM here, does that mean that Sol is going to accrue value now because Eclipse is using the SVM? I would make that same argument. I don't think so, right? I don't think that Sol accrues value from this. I think that it may be a net benefit for the Solana ecosystem because developers can build on the SVM L2 and then also deploy their app to Solana L1. But then that becomes a question of, okay, will this SVM L2 outcompete Solana L1 for usage? You know, will it even make sense for you to deploy your app onto Solana L1 if you've launched it on the Eclipse SVM and it's getting usage there and you just want to focus it on that? Maybe you launch it on Solana L1, it doesn't get usage, right? That's actually even worse outcome for Solana. So I think that it does definitely benefit the Solana ecosystem in terms of getting more people to use the SVM, get familiar with it, build smart contracts for it, all that good stuff there, which could have a downstream effect for Solana L1. But again, that is an ecosystem question. It depends on what people choose to use, where users gravitate towards, and we won't know that for probably a couple of years at this point. We're going to have to actually see these things in the wild to actually get a conclusion there. But does it actually drive long-term value to Sol? I don't think so, because no one using the Eclipse SVM is going to be driving value back to Sol. There are no fees paid to Solana, for example, right? Maybe there's some narrative benefit here, but that's arguable because there's no real kind of like objective way to measure that. So again, it remains to be seen, but I don't really think so. Okay, now finally we get to the settlement layer here, which is obviously Ethereum L1. Does this drive value to ETH as an asset? Well, here is when you can actually start to map things, right? Where you can actually start to map value accrual here. So by posting its kind of like proof to Ethereum L1, it's not posting its data there, at least right now. Maybe in the future it does, but it's not It's not posting its data there right now. By posting they're calling it a commitment here to Ethereum, they have to use ETH as gas, obviously, to do that. And it's going to be very cheap to do that. It's not going to be expensive. So it's only going to be a little bit of value flowing there. But then Celestia is also going to be posting a Merkle root, or relaying a Merkle root to Ethereum as well, which again is part of the settlement of Ethereum L1 here. But again, that's probably going to be relatively cheap for them to do. And it's not going to fundamentally drive that much value to ETH, right? In terms of like measurable value capture. But where ETH really shines here is in the fact that ETH is used as a money, as a collateral asset, as the kind of shelling point token for the entire Ethereum ecosystem. And this Eclipse SVM is part of the Ethereum ecosystem. So essentially what Ethereum does is it exports ETH to this Eclipse SVM, and then ETH will de facto become the money of the Eclipse SVM, because I can't remember if it was detailed yet. Yeah, it is. They say here ETH will be used as the gas token for Eclipse SVM. So ETH just automatically by default becomes the money of that ecosystem, not only because of its use as a gas token, but because it's the easiest thing for people to bridge across to here to get started using the Eclipse SVM with. So there are actual direct links you can draw here for ETH to accrue value because of this. Whereas with the execution and data availability portions here for Celestia and Solana, it's much harder to see where the value accrual comes from. And we don't actually know what Celestia is, at least I haven't seen that we know how much Celestia is going to be charging to store this data on its network here. Like how much is the Eclipse SVM going to be paying to Celestia versus paying to Ethereum? We don't know that yet. But as I said before, data availability is going to become so commoditized that it's going to be so cheap to post data. And then really what you're choosing your data availability layer based on, I think it really would come down to security, reliability, decentralization, all that same stuff there. And as I've argued before, I think something like eigen data availability will be probably the next best thing to Ethereum. Obviously, Ethereum data availability is the gold standard, but I think eigen DA will be the next best thing because of the fact that it's using restaked ETH and as its security, right? Rather than a new token that hasn't like for example, a new token with the Celestia token in order to secure itself here, and ETH is a lot more valuable, and you could probably have a much easier time bootstrapping a relatively diverse and distributed and decentralized validator set for eigenDA than you could for something like Celestia, which is obviously a brand new network, hasn't been around for very long, isn't even live on mainnet yet. So that's where the value accrual becomes more arguable there. But if I had to rank in terms of wins here, in terms of what ecosystem wins the most from this to the least, I would say Ethereum, Celestia, Solana in that order, to be honest, based on all the arguments that I've just given. And I know people are going to disagree with me. I know people are going to accuse me of being biased towards Ethereum, but because obviously, I can't hide that I'm biased towards Ethereum, obviously, because I spend all my time covering Ethereum. But I think based on all the arguments that I just gave over the last few minutes, you can see how I reached these conclusions based on the available facts and data that we have today, while also noting that there are a lot of open questions here as well. So this could change. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe Celestia accrues a lot of value from this because the Eclipse SVM is paying a lot to store its data on Celestia, right? But then it then begs the question for me. It's like, okay, if they're paying a lot to Celestia, but then eigenDA comes along and it's much cheaper to store your data there and you get better security guarantees, then why wouldn't they start using eigenDA, right? And then what if Ethereum data availability with 4844 plus and dank sharding and all that stuff later down the line, maybe the next 2 to 3 years, comes along and starts offering even cheaper DA than anywhere else, and it's obviously much more secure? Does that change there? So really, when I look at it holistically, I really can only say that ETH accrues value from this. I don't think that Celestia accrues value from this, or the Celestia token, and I don't think the Sol token accrues value from this. At least fundamentally. There's narrative value to be had as well, but that also applies to ETH, because again, ETH is getting a narrative benefit for you here by basically saying, well, we told you that everything would become an L2 on Ethereum, and here it is playing out. Here we're taking some really good technology, the SVM, and making it an L2 on Ethereum, where it could potentially be more used than Solana. Because one key differentiation here was that the EVM forks were never more used than Ethereum L1 in terms, it depends on how you want to measure this, but they never came close to being more used in terms of fee revenue, right? In terms of accruing value to the actual tokens here. And then obviously layer 2s have taken the reins, and they're EVM compatible too, and they're obviously net positive for Ethereum because they're built on Ethereum, they settle down to Ethereum, all that good stuff that I've talked about plenty of times on the refill before. So if I'm taking a longer term outlook here, then it really just is bullish for Ethereum and ETH in my mind. But we'll have to see how it plays out. As I said, lots of open questions, but that's my general thoughts on this. You can go read the full announcement for yourself to see exactly what they're building here, how they plan to scale this thing, and why they're building it, all that good stuff. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so guys, do you remember Arbitrum Odyssey, that kind of like initiative that the Arbitrum ecosystem was running? I think it was last year, and they paused it because the network just became clogged because there was so much demand for it. Well, guess what? Next week being this week, the Arbitrum Odyssey is actually returning. So yeah, it's been a while since it's been around. I think it's been quite a while actually, but it is actually returning this week sometime. Maybe they've already announced it because I'm recording this at like 10 p.m. my time. No, I don't think they've announced it yet. But yeah, this is relaunching this week. No other details so far. I don't think there's just a bit of a teaser video here. Oh no, here it is. There's the date here, September 26th. It was buried in the video. So yeah, September 26th. That's tomorrow. Yeah. So tomorrow, Arbitrum Odyssey is returning, and they say here reignited. So I'm looking forward to the announcement tomorrow to see exactly what they're doing here with Odyssey, what they've changed, and how this will kind of play out. But I think that, as I said, that there was that governance, I guess, like vote for approving 40 million ARB to be distributed to the Arbitrum ecosystem out of the DAO, out of the treasury, in order to bolster Arbitrum's growth. And I think the Arbitrum Odyssey will probably play a part in that as well. So I'll keep tabs on this and keep you guys updated on it. All right, so Aztec announced last week that they're building something called, or I guess like they've released something called the Aztec Sandbox, which they're saying is a fully decentralized, privacy-preserving L2. So the Aztec Sandbox is a local developer testnet for privacy-first applications. And if you're a developer, you can go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But great to see that Aztec have launched their first kind of testnet here for their new L2 that they're launching. As I've said before, they're working on a non-EVM, so it's not going to be EVM compatible or anything like that. It's not an EVM chain, but a non-EVM layer 2 that is fully decentralized from day one and privacy-preserving / encrypted. And this has been the goal of Aztec, obviously, for a very long time now. They recently had their Aztec.money thing that they shut down, which is their kind of proof of concept, and then they've been fully working on this with, I guess, like their mainnet launching hopefully over the next few months or something like that. But if you're a developer, you can go check out this new Aztec Sandbox, which, as I said, is a local developer testnet for privacy-first applications. All right, Matt Feinstein from the Tyco team here wrote an extended definition of Ethereum equivalence. So he titled this post, Extending the Ethereum Equivalence Definition, and you can go check this out for yourself. It is a bit of a long post here, but well worth the read. It talks about exactly what Ethereum equivalence means, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a social perspective. As you can see here, that you've got like a pyramid. I don't know if pyramid is the right kind of thing that should have been used here, because pyramids often get memed to be like pyramid schemes, but anyway, there's a pyramid here with EVM equivalents, technical EVM equivalents at the bottom. You've got Ethereum equivalent above that as the architecture. And then above that, you've got permissionless and decentralized equivalents. And then philosophically aligned sitting at the top, which obviously falls into the social layer side of things here. But I'm not going to go over the whole post, obviously, because it's quite long here. I just wanted to put it on your radar in order for you to read it. So I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to go do that. All right, so Base have introduced something called Pessimism, which is an open source monitoring system designed to enhance security of Base as well as the broader OP stack and ethereal ecosystem by quickly detecting and responding to a myriad of protocol threats. Pessimism is a monitoring system crafted to help support the security of all OP stack and EVM compatible chains. The system has overseen and monitored Base mainnet since launch, and they've open sourced this tool as free software. So it consists of 3 subsystems, which is the ETL, which is responsible for parsing and transforming real-time data, the risk engine, which is actively assessing that data, and alerting, which propagates alerts downstream. So this tool is actually going to be really, really good for, as I mentioned, not just the OP stack, but all EVM chains, because it allows them to monitor their systems for things like the sequencer going down, the validator going down, the gas fees not being kind of like topped up on chain in order to pay for the proofs and data to be posted to for the batches to be posted to layer 1. And these are all things that we've actually seen play out. Obviously, Base had a period of time where they weren't posting batches to layer 1, I believe. Arbitrum has done this before. I think even OP Mainnet at one point had done it before. But this is the thing, right? These things are expected to happen and probably keep happening for the next few years because these are very early stage projects, very early stage protocols. So having a system to monitor this in place is obviously very, very important. And Base basically open sourcing this and giving it away for free is awesome. I mean, they built this at Coinbase and basically said, you know what? We're giving this away for free to the community here, which goes back to my, I guess, like discussion around how layer 2s not only benefit Ethereum technically, but socially as well, because this is a social layer play as much as it is a technical layer play where essentially, they've built this technical tool, but because Base is socially aligned with Optimism, which is socially aligned with Ethereum, then they basically said, well, we're going to give this away to the entire Ethereum ecosystem for free because that's what we do in Ethereum. We value open source, we value giving back, we value public goods, and Base has taken this upon themselves with this Pessimism release here. So yeah, you can go check out their tweet thread and blog post here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to learn more about this. All right, so a couple of updates out of the L2 Beat ecosystem here. So they say here, with recent updates to our website, we've standardized naming and descriptions across all project pages and updated our FAQ to address key questions. The update includes answers to questions like, are Validiums and Optimums L2s? What exactly are L2s? Why does the main table contain projects that are not trust minimized L2s yet? How exactly do we calculate metrics like TVL? And what do the value in a TVL breakdown mean? So you can see the answers to all of these questions in this website here, or in this FAQ page here, which I'll link in the YouTube description below for you to do so. But I think that this question here is something that I kind of wanted to just go over because it's something that I maybe disagree with, but the question is, are Validiums and Optimiums L2s? And they say here, Validiums and Optimiums are not L2s. By not publishing data on L1, they introduce additional trust assumption on top of it. If the data is to construct the state is not made available by the operators of the off-chain DA solution, funds are at risk. So the reason I disagree with this here to an extent is because the layer 2 or L2 definition is, to me, an umbrella definition that is fine being used to describe things like Validiums and Optimiums, things that store data off-chain. Because we actually have another descriptive term for things that store data on-chain, and that is rollup, right? Anything that is a rollup has to post its data and its proof on the same settlement layer, in this instance, Ethereum L1. But the term layer 2, I think, should be broadened to include things that store data off-chain as well. And obviously, from a strictly technical perspective and based on maybe some historical definitions, not everyone is going to agree with that. And obviously, L2 Beat doesn't agree with that here. But I'm going to keep using the layer 2 term to refer to these things as that, because even though L2 Beat lists this here, there are plenty of L2 researchers and developers that disagree with this as well. So it's a bit of a semantics issue maybe at the end of the day, but I think that using the L2 term to still describe something that, it may publish its data off-chain, but has proofs on-chain, I think is fine. But as I said, this is something that is, I guess, like a subject of disagreements between researchers, developers, community, all that good stuff there. But yeah, anyway, you can check out the rest of this FAQ. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. And the second update from L2 Beat was that they have a new way to measure TVL. So they've got a new TVL framework here where they say, we have adapted our methodology to account for L2 tokens that do not originate from Ethereum. Some are bridged from other chains, some are native to L2s. And I've talked about this before about how not every piece of TVL has come from the native bridge on Ethereum. It also comes from other chains. And you can actually see here in the table what this looks like. So they've got a total TVL. So for Arbitrum 1, for example, it's $5.6 billion. Canonical, meaning bridged in from L1 Ethereum, is 3.8 billion, and external, meaning not bridged in from Ethereum, is 26 million. And then you've got native here. So the way they've just described native is that these tokens are using L2 as their ledger and then minted directly on the L2. So that's 1.6 billion here. And this is things like native USDC, for example. ARB obviously was minted on the L2, and that's why they've broken these things into these different categories, which I strongly agree with, by the way, because I've said before that TVL is such a imperfect metric, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad metric. But we need to qualify TVL with things like this. We need to actually explain that not all TVL is created equal. There are different types of TVL, especially when it comes to L2, and that's exactly what L2 Beat has done here. So you can go check this out for yourself. We'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so Swagtimus here put out a tweet that I strongly agree with and actually goes into everything that I've been saying about L2s, where he said, the beauty of Ethereum is that it's a technology-absorbing black hole. EVM, L2s, optimistic rollups, ZK rollups, snarks, starks, SVM, it doesn't matter. Everything ends up in Ethereum eventually. Ethereum's culture and draw is just too strong, and once you're caught in, there's no going back. So what I find funny about this tweet is that this used to be a Bitcoiner talking point where they basically said that every other network was a testnet for Bitcoin, and eventually Bitcoin would absorb all of the technologies from these other networks into the Bitcoin network. That didn't pan out, that never materialized, and Bitcoin is way behind when it comes to technology. Whereas in the Ethereum ecosystem, it has materialized. We actually have done all of these things. We've taken the best ideas from all these other ecosystems and brought them into Ethereum, right? Whether it's, as Swagnimus says here, whether it's at the L2s, whether it's optimistic or ZK rollups, whether it's using snarks or snarks, and then even the SVM, as I was explaining with the Eclipse layer 2, that's using the Solana virtual machine, which obviously comes from the Solana ecosystem to power its layer 2 on top of Ethereum. And I'm actually aware of other L2s out there that are building using Move, which is what Aptos is trying to do. And there's another L2 that I mentioned recently, Layer N, that's directly competing with, it's either Sui or Sei, one of the other L1s out there. So really, Ethereum is that black hole. It just kind of sucks everything into it. And then once you're in, there's very little incentive to go out. Really, if you look at the amount of projects that have come into the Ethereum ecosystem, the amount of L1s that have pivoted to L2 so far, the amount of projects that have decided to build an L2 instead of an L1, and the amount of projects that have come from other ecosystems to Ethereum because they want to access Ethereum's user base. On net, it's much more than projects that have left Ethereum. And people will say, oh, okay, well, you know, a project like DYDX is building their own app chain using Cosmos technology now. They're not going to build, they're abandoning their L2, and they made that decision. But as I've said before around DYDX, I think that their decision is extremely wrong, to be honest, like very, very wrong. I believe that they should have just improved their L2, and their L2 is still live, right? And I do believe they're going to actually probably pivot back to being an L2 eventually. I don't really, I'm not very bullish on their Cosmos chain at all. I would say I'm bearish on it, to be honest, right? But on net, much more things have come into the Ethereum ecosystem that have gone out, and the things that have gone out usually have failed, right? Because you just can't escape Ethereum's kind of black hole here. You can try by going to another ecosystem, but Ethereum just has everything happening in it. It has all the liquidity, well, has not all of it, but most of the liquidity, has most of the users, has the strong social layer, has all the marketing, has all the awareness, right? So really, it's very hard to kind of leave it here. But, you know, in saying that, at the end of the day, without these other ecosystems kind of developing on their own, Ethereum wouldn't have benefited from those things either. So Ethereum stands to benefit from all of these sorts of things, even if they're not immediately net positive for Ethereum. So I just thought that was a great little tweet from Swagtimus here that I wanted to highlight for you guys. All right, so Rainbow has introduced their extension that is now available for everyone. So they said here, available today for Chrome, Arc, Edge, and Brave, with support for Safari and Firefox coming later this year. So you can download this extension right now. If you're using the Rainbow mobile app, this definitely pairs well with that. But you can see here that a few of the unique features are things like Rainbow extension comes with something called the Magic Menu, which is a smart search command bar that brings new on-chain powers to your fingertips. You can open the Magic Menu from any screen and enter your commands, and you can spend less time clicking around and more time having fun and making money. And there's a bunch of other features that are all detailed here with support from obviously all the different layer 2 networks that you know and love. So you can go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, last up here, I just want to shout out that if you have a POAP from one of these 2023 Ethereum events, whether it's being ETH Denver, ETHGlobal Tokyo, ETHGlobal Waterloo, or ETHCC, you can now sign up immediately and get a free year of Farcaster. So all you have to do is go to this tweet, which I'll link in the YouTube description below, scan the QR code, and then it'll check the eligibility in your wallets. And if you have any of these POAPs, you get a free invite to Farcaster for a year. So essentially, you get to be onboarded to Farcaster Farcaster, and then it's free for a year, and then after a year it goes to just being $5 a year, which honestly, as I've discussed before, is very, very cheap for what you're getting out of Farcaster here. So you can go check this out. I believe that Dan I mentioned that he's actually going to be adding more POAPs to this eventually, so that you'll be eligible, so more people are eligible. So definitely keep an eye on Dan's Twitter account for that. But yeah, as I said, we'll link this tweet in the YouTube description below for you to go check out. But I think on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.